in Korean communities where possibly churches are the only place where we can have a conversation about this, then how does justice look like for Korean Christians? Like, how do you imagine your churches doing a better job of addressing things like this? Or do you even think that this is something that should be brought to the church? Obviously, I believe it should, but have you seen it happen in your churches?
So in my personal experience, I've never been part of a church, especially as like, you know, as a high schooler or college student, where they brought up these racial issues. Like, it wasn't until I started doing my actual like own, you know, reading and studying where I realized, oh, like, this is directly integrated with like what the gospel is. And I think the biggest problem is really the theology. Like, we've been so dominated by white colonial theology. So I think one thing is, like, we have to, you know, reframe our theology. So, you know, I'm glad, you know, you're teaching at Fuller, where it seems like they're doing a better job, because I came from Biola, and like, there's a lot of racism that goes on, especially in the theology department. Like, not, including, it's especially, like, they're the worst out of all the departments. And a lot of the faculty feel it, who are people of color and women. And I think in Korean churches, it's like we have to reorient that, but not just about race, but, you know, like women and LGBTQ people, or, you know, we have to focus on justice in all of those things. And I think for us, we tend to be kind of like, you know, you talk about martial law, like survival, or like, you know, like every man for themselves. And Koreans tend to be very like, oh, like it's just us. But at the same time, when it's only Koreans in the picture, like, we tend to fight against each other because we get jealous of other Koreans. So I think, but yeah, so it's like, I guess
it's more first generation.
Yeah, I still see it among second generations. Like, it's nothing has changed. That's the thing. So you see second generation churches that popped up because they're like, oh, I'm bitter at the Korean church, but they're just as bad and worse. It's just that same fundamentalism in skinny jeans. Like, oh, we're cool now. But like, to be honest, second generation, you know, Christians and pastors are actually more conservative, I would argue, than first generation pastors, because they actually, you know, studied and had to think about it, whereas first generation, they're just thinking about survival and raising their kids. Like, they're not really like fundamentally conservative, like, especially theologically.
Okay. Elliot, I see you nodding your head. As a high school student, you're in a youth group, I presume.
Yeah.
So in your youth groups, is this a conversation that's happening in the sermons, the Bible studies? Are you guys talking about race relations at all?
Probably never at all. It would be really useful and helpful to know more about issues and how we can, like, I think being a better Christian with this kind of information being taught to us as youth group members, it would really help us to learn about how to interact with people, and especially with other races, and hopefully help us to integrate ourselves with like other people and just have a better knowledge of how the world works. And I think a lot of people lack in that area. I do, especially.
Yeah.
Because I've always lived under that like conservative Korean Christian belief of just doing good work and then seeing, oh yeah, they'll get you somewhere hopefully good and all that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I believe many Korean churches still have the, I would say, quite naive understanding and similar mentality that many first-gen Korean immigrant, merchant had. Meaning, if we just work hard, pray hard, then we'll be rich, and our kids will do well in school, and our American dream will be actualized. So we tie too much American dream with God's dream. The biblical understanding of blessing is quite truncated in Korean American context. Partly I understand because the immigrants are all anxious, fearful of the future, and going through isolation and many tensions and challenges, right? So you need an immediate, tangible form of promise or assurance. But that's just for the time being. You have to look at the big picture and actually equipping people to cope with and whether through all these challenges, all these minefields they are entering, they need to teach the skill to navigate these challenges. You cannot simply saying, oh, there is a minefield, you gotta trust God, just walk it through. I think that's where bombs are exploded here and there.
Right.
And we're losing members,
Yeah.
especially younger generation.
When I was your age, the focus was heaven and your soul being saved, and then now for the rest of my life, success. And the rest of my life, I have to get people to believe that. Like, you're going to go to heaven, there's forgiveness of sins, and like that's it. We briefly talked about before, Dr. Lee was sharing about Jeremiah 29:7. If you're in the city, it is not your city. You still pray for that city, and you want the best for that city. You want the peace for that city. You want prosperity for that city, even though it's not your people. So I wondered if that kind of theology was given to our parents, and they had liquor stores. Like, they lived in Koreatown, but they had liquor stores in South Central. If they had this mentality of like, these people are people that I need to pray for. This is somewhere I need to invest. Some of my money is going to go towards the community. I wonder how things could have been different.
The situation of Jews in Jeremiah's time is far worse than others. Because we came here voluntarily, seeking American dream. You understand? But exile was forced. Your entire country is now, completely occupied, colonized, and you are taken against your will. But even that situation, Jeremiah told the people, Jewish people, pray for the prosperity and peace of the city where you are taken into. I believe that's the spirit of the Bible. The spirit of the Bible is not seeking our own security or our own prosperity alone. No, actually, we as a people called to be a salt and light to the other nations is always doing our things in the context of serving, enhancing the common good of the community. Right? Furthermore, many of us are either, permanent resident or the citizens, or even those who are undocumented. We came here to live here, right? So there's no way we can simply segregate and separate. Purely my interest will be served at the expense of other people's interest. No, our interest is deeply tied with the interest of other communities. Right? So I believe Bible is, in that sense, it is very prophetic, and also I would say long-term oriented. And actually, people who can pray and seek the peace and prosperity of your neighborhood beyond your ethnicity and race become the leaders. Because the leaders are people who are publicly minded.
Well, I think for me, I'm just hit by the amount of trauma that one community went through, the African American community, and how much violence they carried and were given. And the response to that was violence, and it was anger, and it led to another community experiencing trauma. Like the reason why people are having weapons in their stores is because they're afraid. There's so much trauma just carried within an entire community. And to me, as a Christian, Korean American Christian, I don't believe that's the best way is to go about it with violence, and it's just leading to a perpetual cycle of violence and trauma, and then that just reconfirms the narrative of pain, whereas this is a call to a narrative of peace and of fighting for that peace. It's a different way of fighting for something that's true. Yes, there's injustice, but there needs to be a better way of going about it where we are not creating more death and more trauma, but that there is a better response.
To be completely honest, yes, the Elliot riots, it was terrible and it caused so much pain, but if it didn't happen, people, the city of LA and all these organizations and people being a lot more woke about a lot of like that wouldn't have happened either. I think the LA riots was a necessary evil to bring us to, you know, where we are today and where we're headed.
I think we need to learn through big events and sometimes through the hard way, because the easy way isn't probably the best way to learn things. And something as big as that probably made and it created the Korean American identity.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We think this is a wake-up call for a lot of Korean American ministries right now, particularly those that have youth group students like Elliot here, that these type of conversations should be happening at the bread table on Sundays, that these are things that we want to be wrestling with and we want to go deeper into scripture. The second thing is, for those of you that are watching that are not Korean American, you're Latino or African Americans, this is also an olive branch. This is a reaching out from the Korean community to say we want to be more involved in other communities, especially second generation Korean Americans. And so we ideally would love to be part of more conversations about justice, but also help our communities wherever we are. And we thank you so much. Please comment below if there's anything in here that you're like, hey, you want to talk more about, and we can try to respond. Questions, and also subscribe and stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you guys so much, and God bless.
Bye.